Quantum computing because I'm fascinated by the huge potential for humanity and the risks of not doing it. We are nearing the quantum computing ChatGPT moment. There's one thing you can't do. You can't command innovation. You can't say, guys, by the end of the day, I want 3 new breakthroughs. We, in this case, cannot afford to not be there at the forefront. We just can't. It's tantamount to being in a war with horses when your enemies have tanks.
Good morning, everyone. By way of introduction, my name is Evan Qubits, and I am the president and co-founder of the Quantum Insider, the leading market intelligence and media publication for the quantum industry. Today, I have the sincere pleasure of speaking with serial tech entrepreneur, investor, soldier, and quantum technology board member for a leading photonics company based out of Israel called Quantum Source. And of course, the former and perhaps soon to be again, Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Naftali Bennett. So, Prime Minister Bennett, few people, to me at least, sit at kind of this intersection, I would say, of national strategy and frontier tech the way that you do. So today's discussion, is going to be less of a technical deep dive, but more about how nations, companies, and organizations really bet on the technology before it becomes obvious. So to kick things off, before becoming prime minister, you were an actual entrepreneur, not, the fake kind that posts on LinkedIn, but the real kind who built and suffered properly, so to speak, with a proper exit and all the stuff that comes along with that. So the first thing I want to get into a little bit is how did the lessons that you learned from, we'll say, building companies like Kyoto or Saludo, and correct me if I'm pronouncing those incorrectly, influence your view and approach to frontier technologies and most importantly, quantum?
Well, first of all, great to be here, Evan. So my own background, indeed, I founded with 3 co-founders a company in the financial technology and the cybersecurity space, and ran the company for 6 years until we had a very nice exit, and then ran another, what was called back then ASP, or now it's called for many years Cloud Compute Company. And I guess from my vantage point as a former prime minister, defense minister, and entrepreneur, I very much wanted to be on the frontier of deep technology, and what I believe will be the world's the biggest deep technology that'll change everything, which is quantum computing. I believe that in this field, we need to take bold, big bets. There's no way around it. It's very different from my own entrepreneurial background in the sense that I developed applications and sold it to customers. And it was very, I would say, customer-centric. Right now, we are still in the phase, the whole world and the quantum world is still towards the huge breakthrough where quantum technology will be applicable for real-world issues.
Absolutely. So sticking with that theme, just a little bit of entrepreneurship, because it's something that I'm particularly interested in the context of obviously leadership. So one of we'll say the next question that I have is, do you think that, we'll say, the trials and tribulations that you experienced building these companies supported how your leadership style as prime minister?
Yes, to an extent. I think the startup and high-tech environment is, I believe, the healthiest environment in the world in terms of focus, in terms of team building, in terms of rapid pivoting if necessary. And many of those elements are very applicable at a governmental level. We need great people in government, which we currently do not have. We need to be able to pivot quickly according to new external developments. And we need to be focused when we want to get big things done. The big downside of the government is there's politics in the middle, which is not a lot of fun, but it's just the cost of doing business in the public arena.
If only governments can move as fast as startups can, right?
If we could move a tenth of the speed of startups, we'd have an amazing world.
Absolutely. So moving on a little bit more to now Israel, obviously where you're situated. So Israel is quickly becoming, if not already, one of the world's leading quantum hubs with a handful of incredible companies and startups and organizations who have raised collectively nearing $1 billion across them. One of which, of course, being Quantum Source, the leading photonics company in the region and obviously globally. So as far as I understand, you joined the board of Quantum Source back in 2023. So a question that I have is one, what made you, I guess, trend toward photonics, get connected with Quantum Source, but also more importantly, get interested in quantum as a whole?
Well, when I finished my job as prime minister of Israel, and I left behind a very good Israel, growing and calm, I asked myself which fields I want to deal with and with whom. Quantum was at the top of the list. Quantum computing, because I'm fascinated by the huge potential for humanity and the risks of not doing it. And then I said I want the Israel's best quantum computing company. I met many companies and selected Quantum Source. Reason being is first and foremost the team, because I don't really have the technical tools to do the due diligence of the technology. What I do have is the capability to choose the single best team. It's an amazing team with professors and 30 PhDs. It's the top of Israel's brains, and Israel to begin with is a fairly brainy country. So it's an amazing team that combines brilliance and execution. The CEO, Oded Melamed, is a very successful CEO and entrepreneur, and I've only been positively surprised since then. I also specifically looked at the different approaches in quantum, and the photonic approach is one I deeply believe in, and I'll explain why. We front load the problems. So my point is the initial breakthroughs are incredibly difficult in photonics, but once you achieve them, then the scaling is effectively limitless. Whereas in the more conventional approaches, the beginning of the hike is easier. You don't start with a cliff, but then it gets increasingly tough, and you hit that concrete ceiling, which we're seeing of scaling, and that's why I'm a huge believer in the photonic approach, and specifically Quantum Source has already achieved the main milestones that were a risk. So we've effectively de-risked the biggest elements of the journey.
So I want to stick with something you just said, which stuck out to me was one of the reasons, if I'm gathering correctly, that you got interested in quantum, particularly in the interest of Israel itself, is the risk of not doing something. So the question that I'd really have is, the quantum race is not just economic, but rather one of the key drivers, particularly from a government perspective, is a matter of national security. That's generally the platform that a lot of countries and regions use for why they choose to invest in quantum technology. So really the question is, from your view, why is it so important that Israel continues to build on its leadership in the quantum space when there are so many other technologies that could be invested in, but also roads that just need to be developed or homeless people that need to be supported? Why is quantum so important that Israel focus on it?
Well, the way I view quantum computing, I view it as national sovereignty. And this is really important because this is from a vantage point of a prime minister. Now I'm taking off my Quantum Source hat and putting on the hat of a country that has unfortunately surrounded by a bunch of enemies, and I cannot afford to be in a situation where others achieve the quantum breakthrough and I'm left behind, because the strategic advantage or disadvantage that I'd be at is one that I simply cannot live with. I can't live with that. I'm obviously, I mean, we have the whole cryptography element, where the moment that Q day arrives,
Yes.
effectively all the current encryption methods are deemed useless, and we're vulnerable. But it's not only that; it's in the many fields in national strategy and national strength, starting with unique materials, unique biology, which can be taken for very sinister needs, but also very beautiful needs. I can't be left behind. It would be, I think a lot of the Aztec analogy, Cortez took over the whole Aztec empire in the civilization with a few hundred fighters, because he had such a huge advantage in the weaponry and strategy. And so it was just an unfair battle. I cannot afford to be the Aztecs, if you will, in this case. And we're entering a very difficult world right now from a geopolitical standpoint, a much tougher world than one, unfortunately, this is just a fact, than one I lived in my lifetime, which was a rules-based structure. Now it's a much more Hobbesian world, if you will. Every nation has to take care of itself independently. We're seeing it across the world. So this is a real conflict I have, because on the one hand, this demands huge investments from the government, which I don't know that they'll necessarily succeed. So do I take them or not? My answer is yes. I have no choice. I have to be radically generous as a government towards my own technology, and specifically quantum computing industry, if I want to not be left behind.
Absolutely. And sticking with applications for just a moment here. So, if and when quantum tech is fully realized, encryption seems to dominate most headlines as one of the fundamental use cases that quantum purports to support. Um, a question I have for you is, how do leaders, such as yourself, communicate that urgency of pursuing quantum technology and the impacts it will have on encryption, which is obviously a massive area which Israeli startups and companies have been incredibly successful on a global level supporting. But how do you communicate that to the public without fear mongering?
Well, that's exactly right. I want to secure my country with the good and robust cybersecurity. I don't want them to panic. I don't need the whole public to delve into all the details here. It's my responsibility as a government to provide that infrastructure. We know that across many security establishments, they're harvesting right now in the present a lot of encrypted data, even though they can't actually read the data, and waiting for the quantum breakthrough, and then retroactively they'll go and decrypt that data. So I'm aware of it. What every government needs to do is prepare very aggressive migration strategies for that day. What you actually do on that day, and for that you have to be at the forefront of quantum computing, both from a technological standpoint, but also from a standpoint of alliances with other like-minded nations. I'm talking mostly about the United States and the West, so we can together overcome that huge obstacle.
Absolutely. And this interview to me is also a great opportunity specifically to educate, I think, a lot more of the broader world on Israel and how Israel approaches startup culture as a whole. So from my vantage point, sitting here in Toronto, I'm consistently seeing headlines of Israel producing top tier companies across quantum, across biotech, across fusion, across all of these wonderful sectors. So you, obviously being former prime minister of Israel, have at least in my view, probably a really sincere insight in what is it about Israeli culture that is, so good at producing such quality startups and companies.
Well, I think there's three levels. I think the Jewish people for many, many generations have been very learned and very inclined towards deep, deep study in philosophy, in ancient legal code, which is called the Talmud, which is a very sharp legal code. The second level is Israel itself is very entrepreneurial. Very entrepreneurial. I think it's a lot to do with the fact that that we had to very rapidly adapt to new forms of enemies, of challenges, of lack of water, of a tiny piece of land the size of New Jersey. So at a very young age, many Israelis, say at the age of 20, through the IDF, men and women are already given huge responsibility, including responsibility of their own soldiers and troops, and that builds your problem solving and responsibility attributes. But the third part is at national level. What I love doing is what I called planned or engineered serendipity. What it means is
Like engineered.
yeah. Let me tell you a story. As Minister of Economy of Israel a while back, and later on as Defense Minister and Prime Minister, in the cyberspace, what we did was we created an environment that can dramatically increase the chances of innovative breakthroughs. There's one thing you can't do. You can't command innovation. You can't say, guys, by the end of the day, I want 3 new breakthroughs in any field. It doesn't work that way.
The Steve Jobs distortion reality theory.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example of what we did in the cybersecurity space. We created in the southern city of Beersheba a cyber park, and we brought the park was built adjacent to the a military base of military intelligence, these brilliant young men and women, the Ben Gurion University, one of our best universities, which is churning amazing researchers, a high-tech park of startups and VCs. And then you imagine, I call it lunch together. So you have a 23-year-old officer, and she runs 60 young men and women in the cybersecurity in the military. And she's sitting down with VP engineering in one of the companies and an associate VC, and they're just talking together. Well, good things will happen. And that's how you create innovation. You combine different disciplines. You can have a medical doctor sitting together with a mechanical engineer. And it, by the way, in Quantum Source, in the company that I belong to, we have precisely that. We bring in people from all kinds of disciplines that think differently. And I think that's one of the big secrets of Israel.
So that's a really unique insight. And taking it one step further, so we at the Quantum Insider do a lot of work with national governments. We work with the U.S. Department of Defense, Department of Commerce, Department of State, ISET here in Canada, the U.K. government out in England. So it often a question we get from political stakeholders: how do we measure this stuff? How are we really measuring progress, right? So why I was really excited about this too is because you have a serious entrepreneurial background, right? You've been part of companies that have scaled from 0 to 1, and you've actually exited them. So in the context of how do politicians or how do governments adequately, I guess, measure the progress of quantum and then tell that story to the community in such a way that they can understand it, how do you go about that? How do you go about sharing progress in such a technical industry right now, which is really in its infancy to many degrees.
I think what I try and do specifically with this field, and Evan, your point is a very good point. It's difficult. Um, First of all, because quantum technology and quantum physics
Alone, that is, even quantum physicists can't explain it.
exactly. Yeah. When my family asks me what am I doing at Quantum Source, what is quantum, just that discussion goes on for an hour, and I myself come out more confused than when I began the discussion.
Of course.
So, what I do in order to explain how the urgency and the importance is, I use an analogy of AI. Even though it's different, but it's good enough to explain. What I explain is, look, for many years, AI was this thing everyone talked about for 30, 40 years, and everyone thought it would never happen. It was this thing that geeks talk about, but when it happened, it changed everything, and everyone feels that, everyone sees that, and just like that inflection point happened at the ChatGPT moment, we are nearing the quantum computing ChatGPT moment. But what's very different between the two is in AI, even if you're late to the party, um, if you're very focused, you can catch up. In the quantum computing, I don't think that's the case. I think we're talking about such deep technology that there are so many barriers and so much knowledge and the skill sets that take a long time, that it would be incredibly difficult to catch up on time.
So sticking with that, I guess this is more of a two-part question. I think number one is, on a global level, there's often this theme of competition versus collaboration. Nations or companies working together towards a unified goal, such as quantum, whereas others, if you look at, we'll say Russia, China, these sorts of countries where it's very much kind of isolated in how they're developing this. Well, from your perspective, I guess, what worries you, if anything, about Israel's position in this quantum race that maybe people aren't talking about enough?
Well, first of all, I'm fairly bullish because in Israel there's a very developed ecosystem of quantum scientists and quantum computing companies at all the levels. From application level through quantum computing, quantum sensing, quantum communications. So we have all of the aspects heavily covered here, and we've actually created this club in Israel where everyone meets and talks, and which is very important. And one of the good things is that Israel is really small, so to get everyone to meet in Tel Aviv is a no-brainer, and they do that. And I believe in quantum schmoozing. So
Quantum schmoozing, I like that. That can be this new podcast title.
Yeah, I just made that up right now. I'm very pleased with that term.
That's the real spirit coming through.
Exactly. So I think, and to your question, I believe that in this particular field, there is a need for a lot of collaboration. There's so many bottlenecks and so many components that you have to collaborate. And I think there's the national aspect and the particular business aspect. In this particular case, usually I think governments don't need to intervene much in technology. So as a serial entrepreneur myself and companies I was involved with, I had zero need for any governmental assistance. Just get out of my way. Let me do my thing. That's not the case in the quantum technology. We need this radical generosity of the government. In some fields, the financial needs are so big that you need some form of assistance. which is asymmetric. The government should not share the upside, but it should share the downside. So, and this is, by the way, how the initial venture capital environment in Israel started about 35 years ago by particular asymmetric, radical generosity of the government.
So, and on the generosity of the government, Israel has really, in its companies, have really punched above its weight from a venture capital perspective. Companies, across Israel's landscape in the quantum space have raised very material sums of money. At the same time, that sort of commitment that you're seeing from countries like, we'll say, the United States, Netherlands, the UK, to a degree, who have invested quite heavily in quantum, has not really been matched on Israel's side. So a question that I have for you is, if and when you become prime minister again, how do you, convince the finance minister to invest more in quantum?
First of all, I am committed to this. I fully understand the how important it is for Israel's future and for our stature and posture in the world. And I think we, in this case, cannot afford to not be there at the forefront. We just can't. It's tantamount to being in a war with horses when your enemies have tanks. And it's just something we can't allow us to have. What I will do, though, and primarily with major Western companies or solely with free world countries, is enter alliances that we can share some of the financial burden, because Israel is way, way smaller than the United States in terms of GDP, population, you name it. So I would try and form a structure which each side would bring to bear its unique advantages.
So on that note, so obviously it does have unique advantages. We've heard a lot about use cases for quantum encryption, being one of the key headlines, particularly as it relates to Israel and the leadership that Israel has in various areas like defense and agriculture and cyber. What other areas, if any, do you see quantum really supporting, and particularly quantum sources technology?
It's going to change so much, but medicine, biology, food, materials, dual use materials for civilian use and for military use. You'll have a battery at 20x efficiency of today. That'll change the whole energy world. Imagine if you have energy storage at 20x efficiency today, that changes everything, the whole basis of the energy world. And I would also say artificial intelligence. I think there are some major bottlenecks in AI, which quantum computing will be able to solve and open up, and that'll be improve the AI in orders of magnitude. It's very difficult for me to say how much, 5x, 10x, 100x. I don't know. But clearly it'll do that. And obviously the whole world of logistics in all its forms, from civilian logistics to military logistics and strategy, and analyzing, a million different potential strategies in 1 second. These are the sort of things that we'll be able to do that we currently cannot do as a decision support system.
So I spend a lot of time speaking to stakeholders across the quantum industry, both, past Nobel laureates to executives across companies in the space. And the thing that often gets purported is, AI is great, nuclear fusion is great. All the areas that you just mentioned, are great areas. But for them to be fully realized in their potential, you need quantum technology to be first fully realized in order for them to get to where they need to go. So fully in agreement with you. So to kind of, we're reaching kind of the end here. And one of the critical things I really want to get to know from you is, if me and you were to do this again in 5 years, You've been Prime Minister of Israel now for some time. What do you hope this change? Like, what does success look like for you in Israel's quantum ecosystem? And what has changed for the various companies like Quantum Source? Loaded question.
Yeah. Well, I would say this from a global standpoint, I'd want to see and would expect that we'd have real world usage that is extremely useful and in orders of magnitude more than today. That's ultimately the measure. So, I mean, from a customer standpoint, I don't care about any of the technology. I don't care. I want the results, the effect in the real world. From an Israeli standpoint, I would say that I would want Israel to have secured its national sovereignty through the quantum world. So we are one of the top countries in the forefront. We have our own abilities, whether they are totally independent or collaborative. It's two options. I don't want to set that, but we need to be owners even if we're not the sole owners of that technology. We can't be in a situation where we need to beg others to provide us access to some diluted version of quantum computing. And from a quantum source perspective, I expect, by the way, this to happen, and I've been positively surprised over the past 2-3 years. I would want to be quantum source to be at the center of the heap. The main method of photonic quantum computing with scale and not measuring physical qubits, which I don't care about, but logical qubits that scale up post error correction, and so we're talking about real effective quantum computers. And in our approach, we didn't talk about this, but it won't require football fields of special cooling, etc., because our approach doesn't require. We do it at room temperature. That's the main benefit, where we deliver the breakthrough without the necessity for radical cooling.
To wrap things up, a question that I get most often is timelines. When will we have fault-tolerant quantum computers? Now, I'm not a betting man, but I get this asked all the time. So I'm going to ask you, if you had to put your money on a timeline, not going to hold you to it, but when would you guess that we had fully operational, functional, fault-tolerant quantum computers that can do things that classical computers simply cannot?
Truth is, I don't know. I just don't know, because we're talking about deep physics. But based on my monitoring of our own company, Quantum Source, I think it's going to be wild. And I would say that within 4 to 5 years, I would hope to have a fully functional quantum computer that delivers the lion's share of the breakthroughs in all the fields that we talked about, materials, medicine, AI, encryption, logistics, etc., and with that companies fully depend on. I think it's possible. I don't know if it will all meet it, but based on what I'm seeing right now and externally, some of the breakthrough we've seen over the past year and a half, roughly, I'm bullish on this.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that assessment as well. So in short, is there a final message you would like to leave to the viewers watching at home, the Israeli people, and particularly your ambition as it relates to quantum and support for the future?
Well, I would say that in Israel, there was a significant portion of the global talent in quantum computing, especially the deepest elements of the physics and technology. Many of them are literally in our company. and it's a pleasure to be with them. This is a feeling of being real pilgrims to a new world. We're all on the Mayflower together. We're in a bunch of Mayflowers, and it's just really exciting. I'm much more optimistic than pessimistic. I mean, yeah, there's the whole cyber element and encryption. I get that, but this is one of the most exciting journeys that anyone can do, and we're talking just about several thousand people around the world that are deeply invested in this. So we're not talking about millions of people that are currently working on it. So it's a feeling of being in a very special and dedicated group of people.
Incredibly poetic, and what a way to wrap things up. So from everyone at the Quantum Insider, it's been a sincere pleasure chatting with you today, Prime Minister Bennett, and we're wishing you all the best success in the future. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you, Evan.